Welcome to Antarctica Did That For Me. We're a podcast for everyday people with a little adventure in their hearts. We're Keri and Cassa, and we have spent huge chunks of our time living and working in Antarctica. Welcome to a journey that changed our lives. We hope it will change yours too.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Antarctica Did That For Me. I'm Cassa.
I am Keri.
And today we're going to talk about the ultimate world cruise.
The ultimate world cruise. Woo!
And you might be wondering, what in the why?
That?
Why? if this is
why would you talk about that?
Yeah, if this is a podcast about Antarctica, why would you talk about? Well, you're going to find out really quickly. So first of all, let's just talk about what this ultimate world cruise is. This is a really cool and interesting thing that's happening. So it's a 9-month cruise. People are going on it, and you can get on legs. You don't have to take the whole 9 months, but it's basically has more than 20,000 passengers throughout. I think it's 2,000 at any given time. Is that right, Keri? Do you know?
Check my sources. I don't, but I know there are at least 20,000 people involved somehow, cruising around.
They have hundreds of stops. They are doing all 7 continents. And it costs between 60 to 120K to do the full cruise, basically, depending on which, what amenities you're getting, right? And there's just been so many interesting things online. It's been going very viral on TikTok. Everybody's really into it. And we really loved this topic because we've both spent multiple winters in Antarctica, and you might not know this because you haven't spent winters there, but there are a lot of similarities and carryovers between what's going on right now with the Ultimate World Cruise and spending a winter in Antarctica. So one of the things that I read that I thought was really great was the way that this is taken off. So it's taken off on TikTok. And there's I think 2 or 3 dozen creators on this cruise right now.
It's like a soap opera. I mean, people are following it like a soap opera right now.
Right. So they're basically creating their own reality TV about what's going on. And I think that part alone is just super fascinating because it's very organic and it's very much, created by the people who are also a part of it, which you don't really see with reality TV very often. So everybody's into it. They're watching it like a soap opera. That's really interesting. But what was interesting to me about it was kind of this obsession with reality TV in general. So I'm going to just go back to way, way back in time to the early 90s when I think the first reality TV show came out, which was The Real World on MTV. Maybe you could make a case for some other kind of reality TV show before then, I guess, depending on how you define reality TV. But that was probably the biggest one, right? The first one was they were in New York, and it was a bunch of kind of early 20-somethings figuring out who they are and where they are in the world and all these kinds of things. So this is this idea of this like social incubator, right? We take all these different people from different backgrounds, we put them in an environment that they might not put themselves into, and then we just stir the pot and see what happens, right? So the way that the pot is getting stirred on the Ultimate World Cruise is a couple of things. Like, what have people been complaining about, Keri? Have you seen?
I mean, it sounds like pretty typical stuff. It's like not really loving your neighbor who's living next door to you and the noise that they're making. It's things like this passenger was treated better than me for whatever reason. I've decided that is true or not true. It's just little, where am I sitting in the pecking order things and who's respecting me more or less than somebody else around me.
Well, and some of it is just roommate shit too. This is what I like to call roommate shit. I mean, with my partner, who we've been together for like 10 years, we still have roommate shit, So this stuff comes up all over the place. And I think that's part of why this is so relatable to people too, is that, if you've got neighbors, if you've got anyone in your world, you're going to have this kind of roommate shit. But also the pecking order stuff, like what you're talking about. I saw this really great Instagram reel the other day, and it was this woman who was like, it was like her mom talking about living her best life. I'm doing air quotes there. And she's like, I just want to be in my house. I just want to be with my shit. I really like my house, and I really like my shit. And I don't like when you go outside the house, you see other people's stuff and other people's shit. And I don't like that. And so to me, it kind of encapsulates it of like, you don't have as much control over your environment when you're in this type of situation. And that will naturally create not necessarily a great reality TV shoot, but reality TV, right? And we used to always joke about that on the adventure travel bus I used to drive, is like, you put 36 people together on a coach, a bus, a 40-foot bus, and you take them on a trip for 16 days and just see what happens, because you will have all kinds of things happening, and it's always very entertaining. So anyway, I think it's just this, we love to watch each other as humans, humans being humans. And this is what I love about this ultimate world cruise.
Any Antarctican who has spent especially a winter in Antarctica, and you've done a couple of them, Cassa, I've done 6 of them myself, so we're very well versed at this thing, because you've been in a situation where you've watched the same people in front of you day after day after day, and you've gotten to know how those people even walk, even move around. You could recognize them from behind, way down the long cruise ship hallway. It's going to feel a different way to your brain, I think, than it would if you weren't on that ship. And I also know from us both spending time in Antarctica, I was very not literate about being a community member before I started working at an Antarctic station. And I mean that in ways, even now within my own little apartment with my husband, Alex, I'm a better community member, because you see the thing that you lay there, how that affects other people. And you see that the way that you might be gathering this group is affecting other people, or you just don't see those things in day-to-day life, in day-to-day American life as much, I don't think, right now. And so all of the people on this cruise are really being thrown into this incubator that it took me years to learn how to try to be a person who lived with other people that close, It takes some practice. It doesn't come naturally. And in the parts that don't come naturally, I think is where people are finding the human stories of this ultimate world cruise.
Do you think it's because people we're kind of isolating ourselves a little bit more now?
I just think that we don't tend to live in a series of rooms with, say, 10 people in it. Most of us these days, and so the day-to-day squiggle and squirm of like just having your space and being a human who sprawls out and coughs loudly and like all that stuff that you can do, I can do right now. I'm sitting in a room by myself. It would be very bothersome if I only had 1/6 of this space. And so I think the best of us become a little more self-aware, but even the best of us, it's a little bit of learning curve. I don't think the stuff having, you've spent a lot of time at McMurdo Station, and I also have, but that's a big station. That's 1,000 people. And you have less space, but it's really cramped, but you're not doing a lot of the day-to-day things. When I'm at a station like Palmer Station, much smaller, sometimes 40 people, and everybody has a share of dishes to do, and everybody has a share of toilet cleaning to do. And if you leave a mug around, like it stands out, I've watched really great people that I think are great social humans in the world, really struggle with the little day-to-day things that get to the other people around them. So it's not natural. I don't think it's an easy, they're on a vacation, so who's feeling sorry for people on a 9-month cruise? But these little human frustrations, they are universal, they really are.
Well, and I think when we're trying to control our environment, we're trying to keep ourselves feeling safe. And when you throw yourself into an environment that feels maybe not unsafe, but you can't control it as much, you're going to start to see more people freaking out because they don't feel as safe. They don't feel as unconsciously safe, if that makes sense. So I think that's a really good point. And one of the things that's gone viral is this one woman made a bingo card to check off the things that happen on the Ultimate World Cruise, which I just thought was so fantastic. It's things like, not necessarily the things that happen, but the bingo card itself. And so it's things like a fist fight has already happened. Cliques are forming. There's a few other things. There was a COVID outbreak, shocker, an early departure, and then a sort of pirate takeover, which I don't really know a lot about, but so these kinds of things. Drama. And I think I was thinking about that in terms of Antarctica, in terms of a winter. Is the bingo card. What would the bingo card be for a winter in Antarctica? What would be the things that have happened?
I gotcha, girl. I just feel,
especially with 6. I've done 3. You've done 6.
Doing this fresh, and I still feel like I could name a few. Well, there's definitely gonna be some dastardly, scandalous breakup, and it can take a lot of different iterations. Hope to God, it's not you yourself, because if you're involved in that, it's hard to be in a closed community. But it might be people in the closed community. It might be somebody who has a relationship outside of the community. That person decides they don't want to be in the relationship anymore. Or, very common happens, well, not common, but it happens. If it's that person who's there in Antarctica decides they don't want to be in this relationship anymore. But either way, it feels a way, and either way, there's probably going to be one or two, sorry, everybody knows about.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And it's a bummer.
I mean,
so X, that's free space.
That's a huge one. I've seen marriages of 20 years break up through a winter in Antarctica. And that was actually kind of one of the, I mean, I wouldn't say a test necessarily, but before I decided to move to New Zealand to be with Jace, my partner, who is from New Zealand, I was like, all right, let's do a winter. Let's just see how this goes. Yeah, because I figured if we could get through a winter in Antarctica, we would be fine. And
okay, I know this is here, Cassa, but on our list of podcasts, we're going to do a relationship in Antarctica podcast.
Absolutely.
We can't cover that all this time, but that's...
No.
Oh
so
my
that's
gosh.
definitely one. Another one.
You do one.
I would say that there is always going to, well, not always, but there's usually going to be somebody who either has a serious mental health issue or some physiological sleep issues, which can contribute to a mental health issue. My first winter, there was a guy who they had to put on lithium, and you would watch him walk around the galley, which is where our cafeteria basically, and he was moving like he was in quicksand. He was just going so slowly, and it was because they were trying to get his dosage right, I guess. But I mean, I don't know, obviously, but you would watch him and just think, there but for the grace of God go I, like, is that going to happen to me? You know, because that was my first winter, and I really didn't know how important all the physiological aspects of taking care of yourself were and what to expect. And so it was really scary. I mean, obviously it was very scary for this man and for the people who were caring for him, but it was really scary for me to watch too, because I was just thinking, whew, that could happen to any of us. And at least on Ultimate World Cruise, you could leave the cruise. In Antarctica, you could not in that winter.
Yeah.
I mean,
no,
now
really
they have winter flights, but at that time you really couldn't. And actually, all 3 winters I've witnessed that to some degree or another, of someone really struggling.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I've been a person struggling. I don't know, it wasn't ever medevacable, but I've gone to some dark places, you know, in Antarctica, especially during the winter.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always just kind of a degree of how are we going to respond to these things. We just don't really know. Until we get into it. Yeah,
you don't know until you know. It's like an emergency. Are you going to be the person who like runs around, or are you going to suddenly get calm? You never know.
Are you going to be that bingo card person?
Are you going to be the bingo card person? Okay, I'm going to give you the X for that one, and I'm going to choose for my bingo card X. Someone's going to complain about the food, but I don't think it's always justified. That's the preface that I would put on that. Like, sometimes it is, like anywhere, but the chefs work very hard in Antarctica, and people, when it's quiet and dark, there's not a lot to talk about. So their work is in the focus a lot. Not entirely fairly, but definitely as a bingo card of something that will happen in Antarctica. Not because I personally think the food deserves this, but somebody will complain about the food. I'm taking that for my X.
Yes, that's a good one. That's an excellent one. And part of the reason people complain about the food is A, again, they can't control the environment, and B, we don't get freshies. We call them freshies, but we don't get fresh fruits and vegetables down there for 6 months. True. So, I mean, I know they're complaining about the food on this cruise, even though it's cruise ship level food. Yeah. But it's going to be kind of samey. You know, it is. That's just the way it is. You get used to the kitchens. Yeah, for sure. And you don't have that control over your diet anymore. You don't have control. So, yeah, that's a really good one. Another one that I will say that always came up. So, for us in Antarctica, we had epic parties. And I wouldn't say just like getting smashed parties. Of course, there was drinking it too. But it was more like people just got so creative with the parties that we did have. So, a couple of highlights for me were in the winter. One winter, we did a winter, like basically a Beyond the Wall. It was right when Game of Thrones came out. We did like a Winterfell party, and it was so much fun. We had games, like themed games. We had dressage, which is like horse dancing. Wait, was I at this party? No, I don't think you were there that winter. You would remember. And they took an old quilt and they made this horse costume that 2 people would be in, and they would try to do horse dancing. It was just the most amazing and weird thing. And then they had falconry, where you had to like take these little burrs that they made that had magnets on them, and then they had washers on the floor, and you had to get the coins, which were the washers, and whichever team got those. So it was like we had these houses We had I was in House Gay Wadula, which was, I was actually the only person who identifies as, heterosexual in House Gay Wadula, but we had a really beautiful sigil that had a rainbow and it had a unicorn, bucking. It was so fantastic. So, it was just like such a great party. Another one that I remember having that was just a blast was actually both of these were Waste Barn parties, ironically. So there's different buildings at McMurdo, and the Waste Barn is, different departments will have different parties. So these actually both happen to be waste parties. But the next one was a superhero party. It was someone's birthday, and you think you were at that one because we have footage of that one. So they created we have all these extra,
so good.
Like huge boxes that we use to ship things down. And so after the boxes are done, we use them to make stuff. And so they made this city in the barn, and we did a Nerf superhero blaster party, and it was so much fun. It was such a blast. Fun. My character
Things have changed in that part of Antarctica now. I don't
much.
think they're able to do that anymore, but we could at the time.
Yes, and those epic parties, though, those always stand out to me because you would just get so creative, and you would, I made this character named the Heart of Gold, and she was a whore in the 1840s of California and got poisoned by mercury and then became this crusader to it was just this whole long backstory. I really went into it. It was so much fun.
I saw you there that night. I had no idea that's what was happening.
I guess I should have stopped you and told you my backstory.
You should have told me.
But the thing that I loved about it is this idea of the creativity, right? Like we take the parties and it creates an opportunity for us to get excited and be creative. And that was always something happen in the winters. And honestly, a lot of times it would happen around parties or events, but it could happen in other ways too. And I will talk about that in a sec too. But that's one of my exes. That was a long
That's
ex.
a good ex. Okay. I like that we're talking about good exes. People don't say that very much.
That's
We're
true.
not talking about that in that specific way, but my next bingo X, which you don't even use in bingo. I don't even know why I started saying that. I get it. We're calling them bingo X's for this podcast. I think is a very Ross Island, McMurdo Station, and New Zealand Station, Scott Base oriented X. And if you are at McMurdo Station as an American in the winter, you're going to get to X off making a ton of Kiwi friends, a lot of friends from New Zealand. It's one of the rare parts. There aren't many places in Antarctica where different countries' bases are close to each other so you can interact. King George Island, way up on the peninsula, there's a lot up there. But other than that, stations are hundreds of miles away. No way you're going to see those people. But on Ross Island, McMurdo Station is 2 miles away from Scott Base, New Zealand Station, and we make New Zealand friends, and they're the best. We love, love, love New Zealanders. So much that Cassa is just hanging out with one all the time now.
Literally.
And I
Loves
actually
met
met my
husband,
exactly who was working at the New Zealand Station, although he is not a New Zealander. Or I guess he is a New Zealander now. Now he's a citizen, but you're definitely going to make some New Zealand friends. Great friends.
That's a great one. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Especially in the winter, because they only have 11 people on their base in the winter. McMurdo has about 140 usually. So you definitely get to know people. So
do that on the World Cruise.
That is my next one, that you get to know people better because you're in this closed environment, right? And some for better, some for worse. But you definitely get this, and people kind of become this cast of characters, but hopefully not in a way that's like stereotypical. I do find that there's always going to be some stereotypical, maybe more archetypal actually, people that show up, right? Like you're going to have, I would call myself like the goofy hippie or something like this, right? You're going to have a bunch of those probably, let's be honest. But you might also have kind of like, I like to think of it as like the weird old man, or maybe like a grandpa kind of guy. Like, there's generally going to be that guy, who I generally love. And then there's also going to be the hipster. Maybe there's definitely some hipster action going on. So those are, archetypes / stereotypes. But I think that the point of it is that there's going to be these characters that people either choose to play or not to play. And I find that a really interesting thing that happens in the winters there. And I'm guessing is happening on this world cruise too.
Oh, I love it. And I when you started talking, it reminded me, in not even an archetypical way, but I don't know if this will happen with these guys because they are strangers and they're paying customers. But at least for those months that we spent in the winter, you do get to know some people that you don't even like very much, and you care about them like family. Like I would be devastated to hear bad news, any sort of bad news about some of them truly, I think, terrible human beings. They're not being great people in this world. Let me tell you what.
Yeah.
And they, need to accept responsibility for those things, but I still care about them. And the reason I care is because we spent that time together, and there were hard times for all of us, I think, in our brains and our hearts. And maybe that will bond some people. I'm sure there are people who will be lifelong friends from that Ultimate World Cruise who would have never really given each other the time of day minus that situation. And I think that's a real gorgeous thing about a forced situation like that. For people who take advantage of it. It made me a better person, even though maybe I'm a worse person for knowing those people. I don't know.
No. I mean, again,
I'm a better person, but also they're real dirtbags.
But it just helps you. I think that there's value in the dirtbags. I mean, I think that, obviously the contrast helps teach us what we don't want or what we do want. And nobody is all good or all bad,
Yeah.
So we can, anytime we can reinforce that and remember that with these bringing some of these people into our lives, not necessarily all the time by every single standard, but in this type of way, I think it's really valuable. It teaches us a lot about ourselves.
I think so too. Can I have one more X? I know we're sort of like nearing the time that we want to talk, but I have to say, you're gonna learn a new skill. For me, It was learning to play guitar. A lot of people, it's learning to play various musical instruments, but there's knitting, there's all sorts of sporty kinds of things. You're going to learn something, maybe because you're bored, maybe because you're sick of looking at the faces, maybe because it's just a space where you've got time and you're an elevated person, but you're going to come away from those 9 months with a new skill.
Absolutely. And I mean, because we have like the craft room. I ran the craft room for years. That leads actually perfectly into my last point, is that creativity. So, I mean, I talked about it a little bit in the context of the parties, but people have to get creative because we have limited resources. And even, the things that just fixing your pants. So, for example, my sister did a art project that for the alternative art gallery that we have in December, but she started doing this thing called snatch patches. So she's really excellent at sewing and at quilting, and she's very passionate about it. And so she patched somebody's pants, because your pants always blow out. Like
they blow out.
The crotch of your pants always blows out, and you can't just go down to the store and get new pants. So my sister was in high demand as a patcher, and so then she started doing patches that were tailored to the person who she was doing the patch for. So, for example, one guy really loved avocados. She did an avocado patch for him. And another guy always does the same card trick that we all love very much. And so she did the cards that he always pulls as the end of that card trick as his patch. And so that kind of creativity, though, being able to push yourself to think about alternative ways to do things, alternative ways to create things, and to create that fun. It makes it really, really fun. And I'm guessing, they'll have more opportunities to do things like that, but they're probably going to have to get a little more creative in how they relate to each other and spend their time, as you said.
I think so too. And this is not my own original thought, but I saw this video from someone who I cannot find anymore, so I can't credit her. But she was once a trivia master on the ship that's doing the 9 months now. And she just made the point, like, pity the poor trivia person who has the same people to run the game. She's like, usually they cycle off. You can use the same game. She's like, I feel sorry for that person, whoever that person is.
And the hardcore trivia people are there every week. They get their table, they go set it up. They're ready to go.
You better have a lot of answers ready, person.
Yes. And that's why it was good that we always did turns. So different people could do it throughout the winter and take turns, which was really awesome. And that made us very creative as well. So that was really fun. A lot of heckling there. Okay. So, the challenges, we talked about a lot about like the things that are going to happen, the way that relationships changed, and just some of these things that are great, but also challenging about being in this kind of closed society. And I think that it relates to us in our everyday lives now too, is to think about, am I in some kind of a closed society in some way or another? I would guess that you are. And so it's just thinking about, like, how do I want this society to shape me, and how do I want to shape it, that I think can make, that's your adventure in you, right? Like that's the adventure in your day-to-day life. So that is our ultimate world cruise. We can shape, and that is just to go mission. Super cheesy, right?
But it is cheesy. But you got to believe these things, or they're not going to happen.
Totally agree. And so, yeah, so thanks again for listening. We really appreciate having you here. And I hope this was an interesting episode. It was certainly a fun one for us to give. And think about that community that you're building and how you want to keep building it. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please tell your friends. Subscribe to us on Apple Music or Spotify, and while you're there, leave us a review. Reviews help us reach our fellow adventurers. To catch all the latest from us, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Antarctica Did That For Me. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.